you're going to hear from Stuart. You're going to hear from Stuart first, who's going to talk to you kind of some general advice about finances, banking, insurance, things to look out for as well. And then he's going to pass on to Chris. So I'll pass on to Stuart, if that's all right, to start us off.
Certainly, thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. I've got a few slides to run through, and they are predominantly based upon the information that's available on the Scout website. And after this session, we'll circulate details of some helpful links that are on that website, and one or two others that we'll touch on as well. Probably we'll try and run through the slides, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask plenty of questions at the end. I know one or two of you on the call, even if I've not actually met you, some of you face to face. I certainly know one person really very well, and he is absolutely on the ball when it comes to these things. So I do want to give us a chance to have a bit of a discussion at the end if people have got tips and tricks and best practice to share as well. So we'll get going. And apologies, because whilst I'm an expert on Teams, I'm not an expert on Zoom. So hopefully it will all work as I intend it to. So I'm just going to put this into slideshow mode. Okay, so the things that we'll cover now, I'll go over banking arrangements with particular reference to some of the pitfalls and advantages of considering how you set up your banking arrangements. We'll talk about accounting and reporting for groups and districts, and we'll cover insurance and gift aid too. So first of all, banking, the key kind of guides that we have to follow in terms of rules are policy organisation rules, and that sets out the requirements of banking under Rule 3.5 there. We also need to have consideration to the requirements of the Charges Commission as well. The two are kind of in sync, but they're effectively the things that govern us. Ultimately, as a group or a district, I think actually you're all groups, but so I'll stop saying districts, but it would apply to a district as well. You know, each executive committee is able to make its own choice about which bank accounts it wishes to operate and use. You know, current accounts, savings accounts, and so on. The key thing that groups are required to do is to ensure that there's always a requirement for two signatories to operate the account directly. Not that it should just be two, but actually, you know, you might have 4 or 5 signatories on the account, but it's always got to be 2 out of that group that approve transactions on the account. I think that one of the things that people have probably begun to see is that banks have now started charging for quite basic accounts. I think the charity sector's probably been fairly fortunate up until recently that banks would offer accounts free of charge, or certainly basic accounts free of charge, and even those basic accounts now are getting charges levied against them. And HSBC have certainly introduced that, I think, on all of their charity accounts now, irrespective of scale, whereas the smaller charities used to get them for free before. And I think that as groups are potentially moving in situations where they are being charged for banking arrangements, it gives you a good opportunity just to review whether your banking arrangements are really as you know, kind of in the position that you'd want them to, and whether there's an opportunity to change them, go through the hassle of changing them. Should I say, because it's not always a straightforward process, but I think if you think about what some of the benefits are that you might get out further down the line, that's quite crucial. And I suppose what I'm thinking about, or what I'm alluding to there in terms of the benefits, is moving to online banking. I'll be honest, when I first took over as county treasurer, I was fairly reticent about online banking, particularly because I'd heard tales of the fact that it was difficult to get proper dual authorisation with some of the banks that were offering online banking for charities. And HSBC who were the county's bankers at that point in time were advised me that actually they could provide proper dual authorization on bank accounts. But when I actually got to the point of exploring that in detail, it wasn't the case. The primary user at that time was able to have the ability to set up users and the kind of scales of authorization, and it wasn't real dual authorization. And I think that one of the things that when you're considering which bank accounts to set up is having that absolute certainty that you have got pure dual authorization or triple authorization. I think in some cases is really quite crucial. Now there are a couple of banks that have set up, that are set up to directly support charities, and the county took the decision to move its principal banking activities to CAF Bank, and they do operate a proper dual authorization system. It's my understanding that Unity Bank also operate a very similar arrangement to CAF. Now, neither of those accounts are free of charge, but certainly from my perspective, what I found was that if you're transacting quite a lot of payments, if you're reimbursing leaders and so on, there's an advantage to being able to get money directly into their accounts quickly. And certainly, I think when we moved to online banking, we actually saved money, and that was purely on the cost of stamps of posting checks. And 5 years ago, stamps were even cheaper, well, significantly cheaper than what they are now. So I suspect that saving, even for a group, if you're dishing checks out by post.
I'll jump in at this point, and I've got a slight bias on this one, but when Cookridge Methodist moved to online banking a few years ago, there were only two. I hadn't heard about the Unity changes, and it was CAF and Lloyds were the only two that, and the benefit we found is that Lloyds are free. I no longer work for Lloyds, so I have no skin in the game anymore, but I was involved in setting up that service. But the main question I was going to ask is if these are specific requirements, does the movement, the TSA, actually have a recommended list of any sort?
No, it doesn't have a recommended list. I think that I can see why they do that, because ultimately it's a decision of the trustees of each individual group, district, county to make that decision. But they when you go onto the finance links, they do allude to the fact that that both CAF and Unity have the controls that are in place. But you see, I've used Lloyds from a work perspective, and the dual authorization on commercial banks, on the commercial banking, is really very good. I wasn't aware that the one that they offer the charities actually matched that. But I think the key thing is to look around, because actually, Lloyds is free, and that isn't something to sniff at. But it's also thinking about
opening new accounts at the moment. Ever since HSBC started charging, quite a lot of the banks aren't actually opening new accounts if you don't already hold an account with them. Yeah. So I'm trying to move, and we have lots of parents who don't have the capacity to use online banking. So we still to be able to use cash and check services. So that's not open to our group. Lloyds is where we want to go, but we can't.
I think it might be worth exploring, CAF in particular, because they do have a de minimis in terms of the number of checks and the amount of cash that you can pay in before you start getting charges. Whereas I'm aware now that HSBC pretty much, if you're paying one check, I think you get charged. I can't remember, is it 15 pence a check?
No, 40 pence to pay it in and 40 pence for it to be banked.
Yeah.
So if you're paying one check at a time, and £5 a month.
And I suppose what I was going to say in terms of the level of charges, if when you're looking at the costs that HSBC are charging for quite minimal transactions, the monthly cost of a CAF account of £8, you don't need to make 2 or 3 payments in there, and you're kind of breaking even on it. As I say, I think one of the advantages that you do get with the online banking is that you are able to transact things fairly efficiently. When I think back to driving around and getting arranging to get signatures from folk, it's a pain in the backside, to be honest. But it's also delaying the actual process of getting leaders and people paid or reimbursed, as the case may be.
Leaders don't want checks, do they? That's the thing.
I mean, when was the last time you paid a check?
They've got an expense claim. They don't want a check.
No.
I mean, we went down the route. I'm first owner. We opened a CAF account a few years ago now, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And at that point in time, it was £5 a month, which I thought, oh, that's fine then. And yeah, it does grieve me a bit to pay £8 a month, in all honesty, but I just try not to work out what that is for a year, because it works really efficiently, and it's just so much better than pieces of having to do checks and stuff, and the dual authorization, which was what had worried me about looking at online banking prior to that.
Yeah,
the dual authorization is great, and even the process of changing signatories. I've been involved with other community groups where we've had to change signatories, with HSBC or NatWest or whatever, and it's honestly, it drags on and on for weeks. Whereas on CAF, you can just do it online, and it's really quick to do.
Yeah, I think that whilst I wouldn't absolutely recommend it, which account to go by, I would say that the experience that we've had with CAF has been extremely positive. If I think about it, over the last 5 or 6 years that we've had them, we've probably put the best part of a couple of £1 million worth of income and expenditure through that bank, and the number of times that I've had an issue, I could probably count on one hand. And it is really straightforward, and the kind of that smoothness of how they deal with setting accounts up and changing signatories is not to be sniffed at. Trying to change signatories with some banks is, it's really quite complex and time consuming. I think they do understand the charity sector. I think when you get into some of the commercial banks, you start getting asked all sorts of questions about tax status and all sorts of things that can be quite time consuming to deal with. So whilst I wouldn't mandate that you use CAF, they'd come with a high recommendation from me, and it sounds like Susan, you've had a good experience too.
Yeah, and it's great as well, just going back to the point that somebody made about people still paying in cash and checks, and you can pay it. And just to point out, you can, if you have a CAF account, you can pay money and checks at an HSBC branch into your CAF account.
Yeah, the slight complication there. I mean, you can pay checks in at the post office for CAF as well, and via post. I have raised the issue with them because there's fewer and fewer HSBC branches now open. I think in our county, we're probably down to less than 10, which can be a bit problematic if you're needing to pay in cash on a fairly regular basis. But my understanding is that they are looking to expand, I suppose, the arrangements about how they might be able to deal with receipting cash.
I've got to say, Stuart, with cash, what we do is, I'm happy talking about it, whether you call it money laundering or what have you. But
I think I know what you're going to say, Robert.
Yeah, the same money goes out of my bank account and goes into as I get the cash. So yeah. I'm exactly the same situation. They've just closed the Lloyd's branch in Horsforth, so I can't go in there anymore. The benefit with the online banking for me is being able to pay in checks just using the app.
Yeah.
Rather than actually, I can't remember the last time I did a scouting transaction in a branch or in a post office or anywhere else. I've been able to do it with certain judicious agreements, I've been able to do everything from my desktop on my phone.
Yeah,
Which, as you say, just that time saving has made it worthwhile. The fact that we're getting it for free, and I'm sorry, Sarah, we must have got in before the rules changed. Is icing on the cake.
Yeah. Okay. We've got an opportunity for questions at the end, but is there anything that anyone wants to ask me on banking at the moment? The only thing I'll just touch on very briefly. One of the challenges that I think exists is about sometimes leaders needing to have fairly ready access to finances, and again, I'm quite conscious that some of the accounts offer cash cards and so on, and payment cards, which moves away from that dual authorization. Now, there are some. Well, there's certainly an organisation called Soldo, which is like a prepaid credit card, where you can transfer a certain amount of money on there, and effectively kind of giving the leader a float. Then, though you did used to be able to get up to 5 cards free of charge. I think that now charities can get 1 card free of charge, but it's just another option for you if you as we're potentially moving away from more traditional ways of running scouting out of a tin box with a load of coins in it to something that's more modern and streamlined. Particularly when groups are collecting subscriptions through OSM and so on. It's just another thing for you to consider that's available to you. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So, in terms of accounting reporting, I would really recommend that you use the information that's available on the scouts.org.uk website. There's some fantastic templates on there, and I think there's templates around the accounts and those have been prepared with cognizance of the charity SORP, and really make it fairly easy for you, and actually present the information quite a decent format too. But there's also templates on there for trustees reports, because it's not just the numbers, it's actually the narrative that goes with those numbers, and also the making sure that you're covering the right topics in the trustees report. I mean, that's not necessarily something that's solely for the treasurer to prepare, but in terms of working with the group secretary and group chair to actually get an annual report together that describes the activities and the I suppose the financial position of your group is quite important too. But there's templates on there for all different scales of activity. I'd be surprised if any groups needed to have anything other than receipts and payments, but the templates are there for accruals if you're above the 100k threshold as well. One thing just to remind people of, because I do see that this kind of gets missed out, is that when you're reporting your membership subscriptions within the accounts, you should report the net amount that the group has retained. In terms of the overall subscription fee, the HQ element, the county element, the district element, you're actually each group is acting as an agent when it's collecting that. So you will need to report the net amount. So it needs to be shown gross within income. So you'd have the total amount collected, but then you're netting down on your income explanation, on your income analysis, by the amount that you transferred across to the district, which as I said includes the county and HQ elements. But that means that the income that's retained, I don't know, if you're charging let's say £100 for subscriptions and you were retaining paying 50 across the district and therefore retaining 50, you'd be left with that 50 in your income in the accounts. And then our external review, again depending upon the scale, scrutineer's report or independent examination. So scrutineer's reports available for charities with gross income of less than 25k, and then depending upon the scale of the activity, when it gets into the independent examination range, it's the there's different levels of requirements in terms of whether the independent examiners, somebody that's experienced or somebody that's got a formal accountant's qualification. And then I suppose the final thing there is just about remembering to make sure that you submit your group accounts to your district treasurer within 6 months of the end of your financial year. And then any districts, they need to submit their accounts through to me. And if you were a registered charity, of course, you'd need to report those through to the Charity Commission too. Anything that anyone wants to pick up on accounting reporting at this stage? No. Okay. So it's moving on to insurance. So as part of the membership subscription, HQ provide liability insurance for groups. So that's liability for the running of scouting activities, really. There's a range of additional covers that are required. So if you own some premises, you need to make sure that you're insuring those premises, and that your equipment, say your camping equipment and your boats that you might have, are appropriately insured too. If the group has any vehicles, those need to be insured. And if you're in a situation where you're employing somebody, again, having employer liability. The last two have been quite interesting over the last 2 years. So having travel insurance and event cancellation insurance has occupied a fair amount of time with people in scouting across the country, I'm sure, with the COVID cancellations that happened. From a practical perspective, I suspect that groups are unlikely to be holding events that are of such a scale that it would be required to have cancellation insurance. But it's just about being careful with some of those, because actually they're not. Whilst it might be abandonment insurance, it's not all. It doesn't cover for every eventuality, and quite often there's exclusions for things like COVID, which are not always welcome. But overseas travel, I think, whilst they've changed some of the some of the extent of the cover that's provided, since the pandemic, it'll be interesting to see whether that actually comes back in the fullness of time. What I would say is that the Scout Association has got a wholly owned company, Unity Insurance Services, and I would really recommend that you use Unity to explore any insurance requirements that you have. They do provide their own policies, but they also act as a broker. The counties use them for a number of years, and we found that we've had really quite a good service, and they are quite proactive on our behalf, and they're always at the end of the phone if you need to ask any questions. But they've got a website which you can go on. But I would recommend that when it comes to renewing your insurance, that you do consider giving Unity the opportunity to quote. Not always the cheapest, but the quality of the cover under the actual Unity policies themselves is very much tailored towards scouting. And certainly when you're talking about travel insurance, I would suggest that you don't go anywhere other than Unity when it comes to travel. There's been a number of instances recently where we've had to assist units within the county with understanding some of the traveller insurance arrangements that they've had that have been with outside of Unity, and it's not been quite as comprehensive as what they might have expected. But Unity is a good port of call when it comes to insurance. And then gift aid. Vast majority of groups across the county are actually registered for gift aid, and we will send you we're hoping we can find the link. I've not been able to find it so far, but there's a great link to a very comprehensive set of instructions to almost a step-by-step arrangement of claiming gift aid. So we'll include that in the link in the email. But it's really quite a simple process. You just need to register with HMRC if you're not already registered, and then you're able to claim back 25 pence in the pound for every donation that's made to you. You need to have a signed form for most gift aid donations, so that would cover things like subscriptions, and if you're doing kind of a sponsored walk and so on. But fairly fairly easy to put in place, and it's just about keeping the records on those. And then in terms of fundraising, in terms of bucket collections, an exemption was brought, or an allowance was brought in a couple of years ago that allows you to actually claim gift aid on bucket collections that you don't have a signed gift aid declaration for, as long as they're below £30, I think it is. And certainly if you're doing a bag pack or singing carols out outside the shopping centre at Christmas, that can be quite a lucrative addition to those hard earned pounds that you get chucked in the bucket. And whilst I don't have any direct experience of this, groups that operate OSM, I do understand that does give you quite a streamlined way of getting your gift aid claims out and then submitting them to HMRC.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Stuart, the £30 bit is £30 per individual person, not per total.
Yes,
so
that's right.
If everyone's putting £1 in, then by definition everyone's under the £30. So even if you're collecting a few hundred, and trust me, I've done it. I've put that in on the gift aid.
Yeah, I suppose the only time that I think that you'd ever knowingly get above the £30, Robert, is if somebody put a £50 note in. But if you did that, I suppose you'd be just quite happy to get the 50 quid and not bother with the 25 pence.
The other thing I'll say about gift aid is that I tend to put a gift aid claim in every 3 years or so, because it isn't a simple. It's a straightforward process, but it isn't necessarily a simple process. So it's a good few hours work, and it's the same amount of work if you're doing it for 1 year or 3 years. Really,
I mean, I must admit, Robert, I kind of do the same. For the county, I'll probably do it every 2 years, but I think some groups the scale of the amount that would be claimed actually would probably mean that from a cash flow perspective, it's probably quite important to be doing it on an annual basis.
Completely, but it was just emphasising you don't have to do it every year.
No, and of course, if you've not claimed it before, you can go back a certain period of time, and that's always welcome too.
I think I did 6 years the first time I did it.
I think they might reduce that now. I can't remember. I can't remember, but I would. For those that are registered, it really is a key opportunity to get some extra money in. And as you say, I mean, it's a couple of hours' work, isn't it, Robert? But I'll say it's well worth it.
And it is super easy now on OSM, as you inferred, to get people to sign their gift declarations. So you literally just go on to somewhere on OSM, tick everybody you want to tick, and then click a button that says ask them to fill in a gift aid declaration, and then OSM automatically then pulls everybody together for you that's done the declaration. So it's super easy to do. Yeah,
I mean, I think that the OSM has the potential to really make the job really quite straightforward, doesn't it? And I hear that there's developments coming on there in terms of kind of managing wider expenses, finances, I suppose, within OSM. So it's certainly something that's worthwhile considering at a group level. And I know that there's a number of organisations, a number of districts that have actually put that in place for their groups. I can see that we've got a hand raised.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the OSM front, is that because does that only track funds that go through OSM? Because I believe you can use it for payments, can't you?
You can use it for payments, but yeah, I think
will work for the form regardless of how you then get the money. How does that work?
Having not used OSM, I'd be speculating.
So basically, if a parent's filled in a gift aid declaration and their subscription, so if their payment goes through OSM, then it would be logged. But I believe if the payment doesn't go through OSM, but it's shown as required on OSM, then you would mark it as paid manually anyway.
Okay.
So OSM
there's a way you
would
can track the
track it.
payments
So
on OSM as
pretty
well.
sure, I'm pretty sure
quite clever.
it picks everybody up.
Yeah, the form on the gift aid form asks for, basically it's the information from the gift aid form per individual, per parent or carer, and the amount they have paid in that calendar year.
Okay.
So it's you don't have to put down every single week or every single month. It is an aggregated
calendar year.
Yeah, the only complication is that if you're doing it for multiple years, you've got to break out the individual tax years. But if you've got the records, whether that's through OSM or through Excel, it's a relatively simple copy and paste.
I mean, I do it every year actually, and I just save the spreadsheet for Beavers, the one for Cubs, and the one from Scouts that's automatically generated by OSM to my laptop, and then I pull up the spreadsheet that I have to complete, and then where I've got parents that have paid across all three or two of the three sections, I just amalgamate. But it's not a massive job, to be honest.
That's good, thank you.
And yeah, it's definitely worth the money, you know, the what you get. I mean, we get probably over £1,000 a year from it, so
yeah, I mean, it's not to be sniffed at all, and
it's definitely something we want to do, I think.
And you know, I realise that not all groups are going to be in the situation where every parent's inclined or has the ability to kind of interact on an electronic basis, but I suspect that even for some groups where that might be a challenge, that actually there will be even a decent proportion of parents that would want to or would be able to use OSM and so on. And you know, personally, I just find it really, really straightforward. If I'm paying for a camp or an activity, just to pay the fee via OSM rather than, you know, trying to find change and stick it in an envelope and remember to send it down with one of the kids when they go down to Cubs or Scouts on a weekly basis. And if you think about, you know, the burden that takes off of the section leaders as well, the more and more that you can push through OSM, and to some extent the kind of the online payments, you know, when you're actually paying for goods and services and reimbursing expenses, the better it is for all concerned, I think.
And just referring back to the costs that we were talking about, you pay for such as a CAF account and also for OSM, you know, but actually I feel much happier now that I've got completeness of subscriptions, because when I first took over before we had OSM, and it was just, as you say, cash in an envelope that came from the leaders when they happened to pass it over to you, I had no clue whether everybody had paid or not. You just kind of took it on faith that you were there or thereabouts. So I'm sure that you'd lose some along the way, whereas at least with OSM, you know what you're meant to get, and you can chase it if you don't get it. So
yeah,
I do think it probably cancels out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and you know, when you weigh up the disadvantage of that cost to the time saving and the completeness and I suppose the strength of the record keeping that you then get, it's a winner all round, really. I've just been having a look through the questions that were in the chat, and I think that most of them have probably been picked up either by people responding or in things that I've covered. But there was Jane had said about struggling to get the name changed with HMRC, and I'm assuming that the name isn't the name of the group, but the name of the person that completes the return. There is a form that you can complete to submit for that, to get that changed, and having had to do that myself previously, it's not always straightforward. It took a little bit of a while, I think, to actually convince them that I was the right person, and we had to provide all sorts of information in terms of other people's national insurance numbers and so on to get changed. Have you still been having trouble with getting that progressed?
Yes, I have, because I'm having trouble just getting the form off at the moment. You have to send a printed copy or something, and just trying to get it back to HMRC seems to be a problem. So I need to investigate that further. But yeah, filling out that printed form, there seems to be an issue with it at the moment. So HMRC know about the issue, but they just kind of say, well, you have to do it on a printed handwritten copy almost. So it's really difficult at the moment to do it.
If you're struggling to get a hold of a copy of that form, I've probably got a copy of one that I've filled in previously.
I can get it. I just can't. I can't physically. It's just really difficult to actually sort it all out. But I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, drop me an email if you do need anything. Because as I say, I do have a hard copy of that form. I think that you might be able to fill out in pen and post them if need be.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any questions at anybody or any topics that people would like to pick up on now before we hand over to Chris?
Yeah. Sorry, I've just put it on the chat. Apparently, for bucket collections to be valid for gift aid, it used to be that it had to take place on your own premises. Has that changed?
Yeah, I don't think that is the case anymore.
Right.
We've certainly
Finding that out. Because previously our group apparently only claimed if it was in our own premises.
No.
The ruling I've used in the past has been it's been organised.
Yeah.
So in
Right.
other words, if it is an organised event, so in other
Right.
words, almost if it's covered by our insurance, then I can claim the gift aid on it. I mean, it's a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I've never had it. I've
so
never
that
had it
could be
challenged.
I think it's as opposed to the collection box in the fish and chip shop or wherever,
yeah.
where you're just going to get random
Right.
donations across a long period.
Right.
Yes.
So if we're in Morrison's in uniform, then that's
Yeah.
organised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it as if you're having a fundraising event and there's somebody there with a bucket in their hand, be it in Morrison's, be it if you're doing a sponsored walk and you're halfway up the one of the three peaks that you'd be okay claiming that. And certainly when I've claimed it in the past for the county, it's never been challenged by HMRC. I mean, in fact, I think it's just kind of a one line that you put down, isn't it? They don't ask for a great deal of detail.
Yeah. Miscellaneous donations that don't total over £1,000 or something like that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Goes into the one bucket. Very convenient.
Yeah, but the link that will circulate to the gift aid process, I think, has got some more detail on that, so you'll be able to have a bit more of an in-depth read around that subject. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll hand back to Elizabeth, who I'm sure is going to hand over to Chris shortly.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. That was really interesting, actually, and thank you everybody for kind of engaging and asking questions as well. It's been really interesting to hear what what you've got going on in your groups.
It's very polite of you to call it interesting, Elizabeth.
No, I think I do find it very interesting.
I suspect the rest of us it is interesting to us, but I don't want to encourage you to admit to it's interesting from your perspective.
Well, I'll pass on to Chris now, who's going to talk to us all about fundraising, especially through fundraising grants.
Right, hello everybody. Come up. There we go. So I'm Chris. I'm Assistant District Commissioner for Development in Wakefield, and from that I have a wide portfolio of things I look at, and one of them is how we fund the district above the capitation fee each year to even enhance our provision or equipment or facilities we have. I've been looking at grant funding probably for the last 18 months now. Before that, I've never done anything before with grant funding. So everything I know, I've self-taught myself in the last 18 months. So it is a doable topic, it is learnable, and I've self-taught myself. Only thing I would ask as I go through is if you could try and hold your questions to the end, as all that'll happen, I'll just get distracted and we'll go off on a tangent and time will run out well before I get to end. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, the number one thing you need to do before you start grant funding is have a plan. Know exactly what you're wanting to fundraise for. So here's some examples. So general funds, minibuses, camping equipment, defibrillators. There's lots of grant funding out there at the moment for defibrillators and cabinets and stuff like that, because I've just got some at £3,500. So there's a lot of funding out there. Climbing equipment, building projects at headquarters, but also adaptations to headquarters as well. There's a lot of funding to assist with stuff like that. For when you're building your plan, there's sort of 3 different types of funding. There's capital funding, which is to buy physical items, so like climbing equipment or archery equipment. There's costs for like paying for training your adults how to teach archery, or salaries for hired staff. But then there's also projects. So like at the moment I've wrote projects and trying to fund how we fund our young leaders provision throughout the district for the next few years, to try and make sure we've got a strong base to support that. So the next question, every application form you ever fill in will talk about your status. And as a group, you need to understand whether you're a charity, as a charity under the Charity Commission, or not a charity, because it is really important that you put the right thing. So this is what it says on the Scout Association's website about it. So the 3 bullet points, they're what sort of make you a charity. So if your group has either over £100,000 in income, you have an endowment, or you own your own land or buildings, and the income is over 5,000, you need to be registered with Charity Commission. If you don't, the Charity Commission classes you still as a charity, but you're classed as an exempt charity, which means you follow the Charity Commission's rules, but you're not registered with them. And it's important to understand that when you are filling in grant applications, because you cannot use somebody else's charity number in your application. So you can't use your district's charity number. Technically, it's a form of fraud, and you're false representing yourself as somebody else. But as an exempt charity, there's usually a community's ticky box when you look for a charity number or CIC, or there's loads of different ones. It's usually some sort of a community group or something like that. Every grant funder's got a different name for it. So once you've decided you want to fundraise for something, the next thing is you actually need to go out and look for a suitable grant that matches what you're looking for. There's lots of sources locally, nationally and internationally to find money. There's lots and lots of people out there wanting to give money away. There is both paid options to find grants for you, but there's a heck of a lot of unpaid options. So Wakefield District does not pay anybody to look for grants for them. There's websites you can pay to access grant finding facilities, but there's enough out there to find them without needing to pay. A good place to start is the Scouts website. So all these links will be in the that comes out. So on the Scouts website, there's a page that's got a big list of grant funders, which I'm guessing are Scout friendly grant funders. And it takes you to our website. So this is the picture of the top of their website, but on that page below them, there's a whole list of different grant funders who are probably quite Scout friendly ones to start with. For predominantly Leeds, there is a Leeds Community Foundation who provide grants for the Leeds area. Every now and again, it covers the Wakefield area as well, but most grants are for Leeds. But I have got grants for Wakefield out of Leeds Community Foundation. So there is options in there. There isn't any open at the moment for non-Leeds, but they do come through every now and again. And the other one to look at is your local councillors have pots of money that they're looking to spend each year. So in Leeds, it's the Mice money, which all the councillors have. But in Wakefield, you can do it through the council website on the community grant scheme. And the documents on the side tell you the different types of grants they offer. I think the one that we can go for is about up to £1,000 a year you can apply for. One of my groups has just done it. The other little bits is once you've chosen what you want to grant fund, you might not be able to get all the money out of one funder. So part funding is a big option, and a lot of grant funders will part fund your project. So at Coderdrift campsite, over the last 12 months, I've fully funded through 3 different part funders, a bouldering wall and all the accessories and equipment required for a bouldering wall. So we've now got a fully working bouldering wall at Coderdrift, and that's come from a number of different part funded grants. So all these websites will be in the email you get, and a couple of others for the Leeds area, which is worth looking at. So a lot of these, like the Leeds Community Foundation list grants, and a couple of others that have come out are just list grants of other organisations for you to work through. So next one, this is really important. So when you find a grant that you think suits what you're looking for, you need to make sure you read all the terms and conditions, the requirements of the grant before you start filling in the form. There's no use spending hours filling in grant forms for your grant not to be suitable, because it will not be considered at all by the grant funder. They have usually got very specific terms that they work to. But yeah. So you need to make sure you read it very specifically and make sure whatever project you're wanting, it fits more or less perfectly. Because if there's any leeway, anything out, they'll get rid of it. They have that many people applying for funds at the moment. Anything to get rid of your application will make it easier for the funder. I have also found in terms and conditions, I've only ever found it once, but I have found it where it says one of the things that do not support are scout or guide groups. So we supported other youth organisations, but it did say in the terms and conditions that we do not support scout or guide groups. So this is why it's important to read it, because they would have just closed your application as soon as you sent it in. So other grant terms and conditions, I've seen one before where it says only 50% of whatever sum you apply for can be for capital costs. The other 50% has got to be for like training or salaries or operational costs. So it's just about making sure you read and balance. Other conditions that I've come across are like there's time requirements to spend the money, return requirements about if you don't spend the money and what you've got to return after you've completed your project. Yeah. Another good one to look at when you are starting to apply for grants is areas of deprivation. So you need to work out if your group is in an area of deprivation. So the government has designated every neighbourhood across the United Kingdom into a neighbourhood with a ranking from somewhere between 1 and 10, with 1 being the most deprived neighbourhoods in the country. Usually, if your group falls within 1 to 4, they're usually classed by most funders or organisations. They're usually classed as the most deprived neighbourhoods in the UK. So we have 40% most deprived people across the UK. And I write a lot about, because I write a lot of grants about for the district wide. So I write a lot about how we support underprivileged young people and young people from deprived neighbourhoods as part of our bigger package. And it's always good to write about how you're supporting young people as a person, because I always wanting young people, but how you try to support our young people from less deprived neighbourhoods and underprivileged backgrounds, because grant funders are looking to try and make their money reach the best outcome. So this map, so there's a website and the government has coloured it all in. So this is the central Wakefield. So the darker the blue, the more deprived the community, and it does that for the entire country. But on your census, the DC this year, it told them exactly where every group in the district sat in relation to what number. So it might just be worth asking your DC if you don't know where you'll sit in that deprivation levels. The other one to consider is, so usually you look at where your group is based to see where it sits in terms of deprivation, but it's also worth looking at where your children come from, because if you look on the map, you see there's a very white bit next to a very dark blue bit, and if your scout group's just inside that white bit, that's probably like an 8 or a 9, but that dark blue is a 1, which that's the big council estate in Wakefield, is that dark blue. So you might be getting young people from the most deprived neighbourhoods into your scout group. So it's not just about where your scout group sits, it's all about where your young people come from. So just to finish off about looking at grants, it's always worth reading them in detail. This is one that sits on this community foundation, which will be opening soon. This is from Northern Gas Networks, Northern Power Grid, and they're all about keeping people safe, fuel poverty, carbon monoxide poisoning. But if you look carefully, the middle one is encouraging interest in STEM, which is something that we can pick onto. So I use that one, and I got £2,500 out of that to pay for pioneering equipment for College campsite, because I was able to demonstrate how we would use the STEM subjects to teach young people. So it's always why it's worth reading grants, even ones where you think it's probably not for us, but we sometimes have little hidden ones in the middle or at the end that you can sometimes use. And stuff like STEM, companies really want to support that, because that's where we think the future is going to be. So, right, there we go. So the next thing is all about how to write your application. So if you go to the Scout Association's website again, they have an entire section about how to fill in different parts of application forms. So I don't want to go through how to fill them in, because they're all different. We all ask the same questions in slightly different ways. It's a right nightmare. It's every application form. Some of them are like 10 boxes long, some of them are 50 boxes long, some of them take an hour, some will take 12 hours. But the Scout Association is a good place to start, because they'll help you understand how to write, to talk about the Scout Association and what we do. But some points to consider when you are writing a application is a lot of them have word counts. So you need to try and keep within the word count. I've done it before where I've wrote, and sometimes I write in words and copy it across because it does my spelling for me. And when you copy it across and you're way above your word count, or I use previous application forms for other stuff and copy it across, and way with the word count for that one. So it's just all about trying to manage your information to get in the word counts. So you need to keep it as precise as possible. Get your story across, but keep it as precise as possible. And make sure whatever your statements you're writing for that one actually fits the question. Because sometimes you read one question and you write it, and the next question is very similar to a question you've wrote. So I've got one at the moment where it's asking me what I want to do with the money and then how I'm going to deliver it. So that's two separate questions. So it's just it's worth working out what you need first. Talk about your local situation and your local group. And so it's going back to how many children you support, the deprivation of your children, the needs of your children, and the needs of your adults, because you can get funding for adults. So I've got some funding recently to pay to teach adults archery and shooting qualifications. So there is money out there to teach adults skills as well as young people. Yeah. I talk a lot in it about the Scout Association's big thing at the moment, Skills for Life, teaching young people skills. And the skills a lot of talk about is like communication skills, leadership skills, team working skills. All these are the things grant funds are looking for, that we're teaching them skills that we can take away and use in the future. So like when I did the bouldering wall, that was all about how they worked as a team together, how they communicated when they were spotting, and other skills they learned. I got loads in for bouldering, but it's just about talking about what we're teaching children, how we're teaching them, and how we'll take that forward into future and adult life. And yeah, talk about how it will change their lives. Yeah, if you want to apply for grants for adults, so talk about, so if we go back to the shooting, talk about you'll be teaching new skills to the adults that will learn, but then them skills will be used to teach young people. So it goes back around to our, because a lot of grants you'll probably apply for will be grants for young people. But if you can show how you're going to spend the money to teach adults to teach children, because like I said, if I teach 10 adults to shoot, they'll be able to teach hundreds potentially of young people shooting from just a small pot of people. It'll branch out. It's just about how it all, for us, it's all about how it goes back down to supporting our young people. And talk about how long the project will last. So like for the Young Leaders Project, I'm trying to plan for a 3-year life cycle on it, because a lot of funders want up to 3 years to fund. And I've wrote a schedule of what we should get done each year, so I can provide an example to the funder. And the other thing I talk about is that with scouting, we don't just have a fixed number of young people. So we have this year, potentially work with the same young people we have next year. So if we have 100 young people this year, and then it changes and we get a different 50 young people next year, that's 150 young people we've supported, rather than just 100. And it's I use that as a rolling example. Say we're constantly supporting new young people every year, because that's what we do. We support young people every year. So usually one of the very first questions on the grant application form is describe your organisation. Most people out there probably know what the Scout Association do. I've got a basic idea what the Scout Association do, but when you're writing a grant form, you need to pretend that they've never heard of us before, and you need to start from scratch. So after a lot of practice, this is the one I've come up with that explains what the Scout Association does. I think it quite covers our outcomes very well, does that. as an overview of what we do. I will make sure I send this to Elizabeth so she can send it out, because you can always shrink this down if the word count's a bit smaller. But I think it's a very good coverage of what we achieve as an association for our young people, and it covers a very range of topics. So, just give you another 30 seconds to finish reading that. Right, I'll move on to the next one. So, as you fill in the application form, this varies from grant funder to grant funder, what supportive materials they want you to provide. Some don't want any. Some want some after they've said, yes, you can have a grant, and some want it beforehand. So some good examples of things maybe to have on hand, especially if you're going to start filling in multiple applications, is this is a big one they want: a copy of your bank statement, but it's got to be within the last 3 months. A lot of funders do want that one because they've got to make sure that they can prove it is going to a charity bank account, because they never pay to personal bank accounts. Associations safeguarding policy. Some of them just ask, do you have a safeguarding policy? Yes or no. But others I have found want a copy of it. The Scout Association don't have a copy you can just easily download. So I had to copy and paste it all off the website, which were a real pain. The other one I've come across, which is a bit funny, is some will accept the national policy as a safeguarding policy. We want you to have your own local policy. So I did write one for a grant funder, but in it I have put that our safeguarding policy follows the National Scout Association policy, but when I listed who's got local responsibilities for what. So I said our chairman's got overall responsibility for managing safeguarding locally. Our training manager's got responsibility for making sure safeguarding's up to date. And then I just listed the Scout Association's policy on how we report stuff, report and record it. But I think I've only ever had that one once come up. One thing they want sometimes is a list of your charity trustees. So if you're a charity, that's on the Charity Commission's website. So it's nice and easy to copy and paste that. If not, you need to provide a full list of your executive members, because all your executive members are technically charity trustees under the Charities Act. That's mainly want to list because I don't like it when you've got multiple people from the same family in a trusteeship role, because it doesn't give it that that overview of a number of people. A copy of POR is a big one they ask for. A lot of grant funders ask for to make sure you have a winding up policy. So just in case your group folds, and our winding up policy is listed in POR on exactly what happens to everything we own, all our money, etc., etc. So, but POR covers all sorts of stuff. So you can go on Scout Association website and there is a button just to download the entire POR into one document. You just upload the entire document from. They want to read through over 200 pages. Good luck to them. This is another one I've come across only once. They want a group constitution of me as to how we operate as a group and not as an organisation. So I did Google this, and there's a number of groups out there that have written them and published them online. So I found one I like the look of that sort of matched my group, downloaded it, updated the wording to match my group, got my exec to approve it, and then signed it off. and sent it in. There is probably other documents they want, because every funder has their own weird or wonderful ideas about what they want to see to be able to give you funding. Another funding which comes up every now and again is non-monetary donations. I have got some of these. So some companies like to give you donations of items of stuff because it helps them, because they can write VAT off and all sorts of stuff against it. But a good example is the Woodland Trust. If you've got land, Woodland Trust will donate trees to groups. Twice a year you can apply. We have 105 trees or 420 trees, and they've never said no to me yet. So if you've got groups that have got land, you can get trees to make either big woods or little hedges and stuff like that. So that's a good question. That's a good example. The other one I've come across a couple of times. So some funders ask you to put a funding bid in as if you're going to get the money back, but then they might buy the equipment on your behalf and send you it. So I put one into a outdoor equipment company, a bid in for some climbing equipment, and they, rather than sending me the money, they sent me the equipment I wanted, because it was cheaper for them to wholesale buy the equipment than it was to send me the money to buy it. So it actually saved them money, so we had more money to spend on somebody else. So it is worth just keeping an eye out for non-monetary donations as well, because they are out there and people are wanting to give them. So one last slide, and you've been fortunate enough to receive a grant, so congratulations. But this is the next one, is make sure you read the terms and condition documents for your grant you've been given. In there, there'll be all sorts of things about reporting conditions and how you've got to spend it and when you've got to spend it by and all sorts of stuff. And that's before you sign the paperwork and send it back. There's all sorts of different ones. Some of them I can just send back like I am. Some of them need dual signatures. Some of them has to have the chairman's signature. I had one the other day that had to have the treasurer's signature. It's specifically asked for the treasurer's signature. Some of these documents are 1 page long. One I was sent last week was 21 pages long. I had to read through before I signed it. But the other thing is, some of them are time limited in response. So some of them are 4 weeks, I've noticed. But a good one at the moment is the Arnold Clark Community Foundation has opened again, which is up to £1,000 for charities. It takes about 5 minutes to fill the form in, and it's for general funds. There's no, you don't have to have a specific reason. You've just got to sort of state what you'll do as an organisation. So when that opened last year, I put 5 applications in and I got £1,000 back out of it. So it is a very generous one. But with that one, that was a 4-day turnaround. You didn't have your grant paperwork back in within 4 days. They said no, because they put more grants out every week. So we want to get it. So, you need to make sure you read your paperwork. Reporting conditions. So once you've spent your money, you might have to return a report to them as to how you've spent it, how you've got on, what you've achieved. You might have to return photos, or you might have to return a midway report. So halfway through your funding period, you might have to return a report. Sometimes they don't remind you that you need to return that report before it runs out. So it's worth making a note in your diaries when you need to do them. I have a spreadsheet with all sorts of grants across it, and one part of that spreadsheet tells me when fund returns need to be brought back. And some of them have publicising conditions, saying either you will publicise it through your media outlets, or they can publicise it through their outlets. But it's sometimes worth if you just publicise it on social media, make sure you tag the company in that have grant funded you, so they can see it, and same on Twitter, because I like to have that interaction with you, and then they can retweet it or repost it, and it gets hits for you and it gets hits for them, and it shows how they've spent their monies. So that's my final one. So if anybody's got any questions from me, what do you mean there?
Chris, I put a couple of notes into the chat. There's one thing you haven't mentioned, and that's the benefit of stitching up your volunteers and parents for companies. A lot of companies have match giving schemes and volunteering schemes, and I've had many thousands of pounds just for doing what I would be doing anyway.
Yeah, I've never used that method yet, but because I predominantly do district level stuff, I don't work with many people, so I don't usually work with parents.
Yeah.
It's not something I've dealt with. But
It's basically people who work for the larger organisations, the national organisations, and in recent years the monies have been not as generous for obvious reasons. But I know, what was it, Stuart? 1,500 quid I put towards the Bramhope toilet block or something like that.
Maybe a bit more actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was just over a number of years. It adds up.
Yeah, I think many of the big banks are pretty good at it. Certainly, HSBC and Lloyd's have those arrangements in place. And I think that some of like the big supermarkets do too.
Yeah, but even some of the smaller companies are doing it. So if people are employed, then it's a good thing to let people know about.
I might like to pick your brains about that later, Robert, because my employer does it, but I haven't worked out how to get to it.
Well, I've had it from both Lloyd's and from HSBC when I switched, and my new employer does it for volunteering, but not for does it for fundraising, but not for volunteering. So I mean, and that's a small company.
I'm at Gallagher, and I think they do a bit of both, but as I say, they've got a website, and I think I need a piece of paper confirming that I've done hours, like this evening.
Yeah.
And then I think I earn Scouts £10, but I haven't really found out how to get my hands on that £10. So if I can borrow you later, that might be useful.
Get in touch. And the other one is a pedantic one. Stuart will know where this comes from. But the areas of deprivation chart that you put up, and the fact that it says that each group and which area they're in, that is based on HQ data. And a lot of the HQ data actually has the GSL or Scout Leader address as the group address, which is often quite different from where the group meets. So it's definitely a piece of advice, is make sure that as close as possible, or no, let's put it a different way. The most appropriate postcode is on the HQ system, because, well, for those of you who don't know, my son does a lot of work with National, and he was actually involved in the mapping project. And the frustrations of, I know this group is in an area of deprivation. That postcode is not an area of deprivation, and you suddenly work out why. So as with everything else, data quality is everything. So I promise I'll shut up.
That's fine. Has anybody got anything else? I'll hand back to Elizabeth. No, there you go. Over to you.
Lovely, thank you for that, Chris. If anybody does have any questions that come to you after the fact, I mean that sometimes happens to me, feel free to send me an email. I can pass them on and we can try and get an answer back to you. That's absolutely fine. I'll just stop the recording there. But that is